Hey, this is Yukine. We've gotten some requests from people in the Corp who are not totally clear on how the fleet participation system works and what all this information inside of the ledger that you see on the screen, or the record of the fleet participation and the financial ledger that we keep in this spreadsheet, what it all means. So I thought I'd take a moment in this video to explain it to you. Particularly from the perspective of what fleet participation looks like, how the rewards for it are calculated, and what you're seeing in this sheet. As you've surely seen, there's a bot that connects the more important bits of updated data from the sheet into Discord. So if you don't want to ever have to look at spreadsheets, you probably don't have to, but if you want to understand where the information is coming from, it's helpful to understand the details of this. And I'll go through it without getting into extraordinary detail, but just to explain what the basic concepts are. So we're looking at one of the pages right now called Stories. This is the list of the story missions. We don't track fleets for even the more complex and valuable news missions. If you want to come to some arrangement between yourselves to share rewards on those, it's fine, but we only track for story missions. And so you'll see a list of all of the story missions, what faction they are aligned with, which can be useful in helping you understand what fitting to bring to the fight, what tier they are. For people who aren't too familiar with story missions, they will all have a number of actions that you have to complete. Usually it's like, go to this station, talk to this person, maybe pick up this thing, take it to another station, and then go somewhere and fight. And then maybe go somewhere else and scan a system or whatever. We're talking about stages here. What we're talking about is the number of combat tasks that are on the to-do list for these story missions. So a stage will generally have between 4 and 5, I believe, waves within them. And so you can think of a stage as a case within a story where you need to go somewhere, have a fight, and then that's the end of that task. And so some of them will only have 1, some of them will have as many as 3, and there's generally a relationship between the number of stages you have to fight and the value of it. This column, this was actually more relevant back before they made the changes to the whatever that was, a month or so ago, but this was a record of whether or not that you had to worry about scram. Now I think basically you always have to worry about scram, so in fact let me just hide this for now. With the new E-War changes, you always have to worry about, even if it's not scram, you can get really easily pinned by cap train or by webs or whatever. So now with the new adjustments, always assume that any enemy that can get within 30 or 40 kilometers of you is potentially going to do something quite dangerous to you, even if it's not an elite. So this is the total payout for the entire story once you complete it, and this notes in millions, so that's 55 million, 300 million. I'll get to some more detail on this later, but so if we look through our list of sheets here, one of the sheets you'll notice is called variables. These are things that we use throughout the whole, through all these calculations. So the corporation tax rate, 5%. Fleet share is the key variable here. When you do a story as a fleet, 20% of the value of your payout from that mission is going to go to members of the fleet. So if we go back here, the fleet share is 20% of the after-tax portion of the total reward for that. So you subtract out the corporation tax and multiply it by the fleet share. It's 20% of the income from just the payout for that story goes to the fleet. But one of the things we've done beyond that is, because there are multiple combat stages and different people may be participating in different combat stages, and also each of the combat stages are in ascending difficulty. So the first combat stage in a mission is easier throughout all of its waves than the third combat stage for that mission is. And so we've also created a system for weighting, weighting in the sense, the value of each of those combat stages. So if you look at this, so we have the weights were currently 2, 3, and 5, and so that adds up to 10. So if let's say if there's a 3-stage story, and you participate in the first combat stage, you are going to get the fleet's share of that is going to be 2/10 of 20%. So it's going to be 20% of 20%. If you participate in the third stage, the fleet share of that is going to be 5/10 or 50% of 20% or 10% of the total income for that. So this ensures that any mixture of people can participate in any stage of the fleet, and they will get a reward, and that reward will be somewhat, fairly well referenced against the actual difficulty of that participation. So we also, and we'll see this in the fleet log sheet, if you are flying a support ship, which is specifically the MOA Guardian, which is the shield field support ship, or a CAP support ship that's supporting the MOA, then you also are entitled to a further 20% bonus income on your participation. This is to encourage more people to have MOA Guardians or other types of support ships, because right now we're limited in our ability to do high-level fleets because so few people are able to perform that support role. So if we look at the fleet log, you'll see that each of these lines is an indication of the date that the fleet occurred, the mission, what stage it was, whose mission it was. And so this would be the total reward after taxes. This would be the fleet share. And so let me see if I can find two that are the same here. Let's take Angel or Devil 1 here. No, actually, I'm trying to find something to compare. This is Magnate 1. Okay, well, anyway, the fleet share, so this is the total share. This is the fleet share, not for the entire thing, but for that stage. Because this is Business Magnate 1. Business Magnate 2 is going to have its own fleet share. And so that's the total fleet share, the 20% of that stage's value. But then this is what each participant in the fleet is actually going to get. Because in this case, we had 4 participants in the fleet. So it's going to be 3880 divided by 4. Let me see if there's any other, and there's also support ship involved. Versus, let's see if I can, like Business Magnate 1. Here's another Business Magnate 1. You can say that the member share is higher because we have 950 here. Sorry, was it higher or lower? Yeah, higher, because we have fewer people participating overall, I believe. I think it's because there's one. Anyway, I'm you get the idea. Like the fleet, even though the fleet share is going to be fixed, the actual member portion of that fleet share is going to be different because the number of people participating. So like if you have like a T6 mission, for example, it doesn't really help anybody to have 10 people in that fleet, because first of all, it's way overkill. And second of all, that means that the actual member share of that is going to be diluted for each of those members. They're going to get 1/10 of that share. So you do really want to, like, out of respect for everybody and also just for not wasting time and overkilling it, want to form fleets that are appropriate in size to what the actual task is. So once we record one of these missions, that's what causes the the member balance sheet to update. And this is rendered from the perspective of the corporation, so I think it can be maybe a little confusing. But a negative number is good for you. If you have a negative number, it means that the corp, like in this case, the corp owes Alexi a little over 100 million. If you have a negative, or you have a positive number here, it means that's surprising. It means that the corp is owed by you. We have a little bit of tolerance for people owing the corporation money, because particularly if it's someone who participates in fleets actively, then you're probably going to negate that debt. But for the most part, if you do something that creates a debt with a corporation, we do expect you to make a donation straight away to settle that, so that you're back to zero. You're welcome to let any credit that you have with the corporation ride for as long as you want. We do encourage you to cash it out. We don't need it. It's not like we're earning interest on it. We're not going to use it. We're not lending it out to anybody. And so there's no benefit to the corp to sit on your debt and to hold on to it. So if you're trying to be generous or like a team player and you're not using your credit for anything, thank you for that impulse, but just know it's not necessary. You are welcome to cash it out anytime. And speaking of cash outs, because transferring ISK or transferring money in the game causes there to be broker fees and taxes, the best way to redeem your balance is in goods. Because we can buy one of the Olympians, one of the sort of managers of the corporation, can buy the goods on your behalf using corporate cash, and then transfer them to you, and that is not subject to any taxes. It's so. And by the way, straying away from the fleet log aspect of this a little bit, we also maintain this ledger. It's another case where I think maybe the terminology we've chosen might confuse things a little bit. If you've ever worked in banking, you might think of these as debits and credits, but a donation is basically a decrease in the amount that you owe the corporation, or an increase in the amount that the corporation owes you. So if you donate $100 million to the corp owes you $100 million, or $100, but $100 million ISK. If a payment is an increase in the amount that you owe the corp, or a decrease in the amount that the corp owes you. So if you had a debt to the corp of 100 million, and then if the corp owed you 100 million and then made a payment then of 100 million, then we'd be down to zero. And so when you're looking at the member list and you're looking at these balances, if you are technical enough and you can read all of this formula, then good for you. But what's happening basically is we're just adding up all of the debts that you like. If you own a mission and then we run it, then that creates a debt from you to the corporation. The corporation's acting as a bank, right? It's acting as a central point where all of these debts are going to be managed, so that every individual, so when Luxon ran this mission, it doesn't create an individual debt between him and all of these other people, but rather the corporation is going to handle that debt. So now Luxon owes the corporation 23.75 million. Meanwhile, Iceberg and Alexi and so forth are all owed 3.4 million roughly. So that all gets put, aggregated up into your balance here. And so if at the end of it, Luxon ended up owing, being in negative with the corp, then he would need to make a donation to the corp so that we would have the cash to settle these balances with everybody else if they want to. But if you're actively participating in fleets, there's no need to one day Luxon is accumulating debt to the corp because he's accumulating these debts that are owed to these other team members. But then other days he's participating in fleets and reducing down that debt. So the purpose of this members thing, when you look at this, it's just an aggregate of all the debts that you've accumulated to the corp minus all of the all of the debts that are owed to you via the corp, and then in addition everything that goes on this ledger. And so if you want to transfer stuff between, like for example, here's a case where I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Ikaika maybe, but anyway, like he wanted to purchase ion miners and I wanted to sell them. If I had simply sold them through the contracting system, then one of us would have had to pay the taxes and the fees for it. Instead, I just contracted the things to him for 0 ISK, which is it costs a 10,000 ISK contract fee, which is basically a 0. Like it's not enough to be worth thinking about. And then we put the values on the ledger here. And so what this is saying is Ikaika now owes the corporation 22 million. Yes, it says payment, but the effect of that is to increase the amount that the Ikaika owes the corporation and decrease the amount that I owe the corporation, and that affects the transfer of ISK value through the corp while we separately transferred the goods. So I hope that explains a lot of these things. Let me just click through these different. By the way, we only put names on here of people who have debts. So if you don't see your name on here, it just means that you haven't done anything that has generated debt. This is not like a complete log or a complete list of all the people who exist in the corporation. Let's see. We covered all of that. Ledger we've talked about. Storage we've talked about. And then the rest of these things are not of interest. This is just how we keep track of how we're doing as a corporation financially. And then this is just variable. So yeah, I think that's it. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them somewhere. And I or someone else will try and answer them. Thanks.